Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to be in Brussels at Xavier Hufkens Gallery for Huma Bhabha's first show here in Brussels with new work that she's made in 2021. The show has brought together so many elements of Huma's practice. One of the things we talked about, which I'm sure we'll talk about here as well, is assemblage, like this idea that we're an assemblage of all of these experiences, formative moments, encounters, landscapes, cultures. And a mutual friend of ours, Jose Luis Blondet, who's a curator at LACMA, was talking to me about Jane Goodall and how she says what makes us human is that we share fictions. And it's really beautiful to see all the fictions that come together in this show, be it references like Mortal Kombat, be it movies. So someone told Huma that these large-scale painted photographs remind him of movie posters. And upstairs, we saw that one of the painted photographs actually does have some of the armatures of the sculptural process. So Huma, maybe we can talk about some of, what are some of the shared fictions that were swirling in your head as you made this body of work?
The first piece I think that I finished was, actually I was working on all of them at the same time, so I can't exactly say when the first one was done, but the title of the show came about thinking about how these were different personalities or different characters that were being brought together by the interlocutor, which is behind us. I chose that title because I felt that that sculpture was sort of like bringing them all together in a sense, and they were in a setup. The setup is sort of like, are we being set up by people that control everything? And no matter how much we feel that we are in control of what we do, but we're not actually.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I think you offer so many hints. Like, I think the show is very generous in the sense of, giving hints at the making process, giving hints at the kind of references, like, you're using images from calendars, you're using Cork, you're using found objects. And also the way that you're entangling these, because a lot of the works have animals in them, but you're entangling these non-human worlds with human worlds, and also how our material traces are impacting that.
I worked with a taxidermist for approximately 2 years when I first moved upstate from New York City. And I think that allowed me to understand certain ways of building armatures that I absorbed into my practice. It doesn't matter how gross or uncomfortable it might be, but it's worth experiencing.
There are incredible texts that talk about this, but it'd be great to hear from you about some of these experiences that maybe are parallel to art that became absorbed into your making, such as your chance encounter with Cork.
Yes, I'm always looking for new materials, and materiality has been essential to my work. And I think when I realized that that was where my strength was, that's when you sort of make a big jump in terms of like how you're going to develop your language. I'd been using found materials like styrofoam and found wood and just remnants of other art processes that, where you have used prints or whatever. I mean, all kinds of refuse. So Cork was something that I found later. It lay around in my studio for a while before I knew how to even address it. After seeing a sculpture by Picasso, which was a fairly small wooden sculpture, I realized that maybe the best thing to do is to make a column out of it and then see what happens, which is the way I approach most of my work. As you get to know the material better, your process also improves and you know what to do.
But it's also incredible how then you take these materials, which some people might consider trash, and then cast them in bronze and use other languages with those as well.
Bronze is something which came much later into my work, and it's also something that initially I thought, well, do I necessarily want to give up the relationship I have to these really humble materials? But, you're seduced by the beauty of bronze. But for me, there is no hierarchy between the materials. They are all on the same level because they produce the same sort of emotional and physical response.
Absolutely. And I think also something with the bronzes, and not only with the bronzes, but it's also your painterly practice as well. And I think it's also beautiful in certain cases where maybe bronze is considered such a precious material, and then you're using lipstick and nail polish and all these, things in your beauty cabinet, which might also be considered trash.
They're not in my beauty cabinet,
but
they're just like sort of leftover.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see, whether those materials will last out or not. I mean, they have the same amount of oil and pigment and everything, so they do have the same result.
Yeah, you're just using them in
a different way.
And I think there's a beautiful work on paper upstairs too, where you were using foundation and some of
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing, I guess, thinking about like makeup and faces is that a lot of your works have multiple faces, right? You can find endless faces. And there's another work upstairs. Your titles always fascinate me, and sometimes was it the 100? How many faces are in that?
1,000
faces.
I usually am very seduced by the idea of the Janus head with the front and the back. But then sometimes there's also, you can play around with the sides. So even the ears or the back, they do have elements of facial features. I titled it 1,000 Faces because I was thinking about Lon Chaney, and as an actor, how he was able to change his appearance in such a successful way.
And I guess, like one hint maybe we can share with people for the show as they approach it is some of the photographs come from images you've taken. So for example, several of them have kind of these desolate landscapes from Karachi that are kind of flipped upside down. Can you maybe talk about that process of building on these images?
I really like the sort of desert landscape that is where I grew up, and also the fact that there is a certain grittiness and a rawness to the construction and to the way that the city is laid out, which is not necessarily attractive and it's not beautiful, but it does have those same qualities for me. So once I took the photographs, I drew on them. The photograph that you're talking about is of the beginning of a sculpture. So it has the chicken wire and the styrofoam, and then it has, some dead flies on it. And I like how it's placed next to the sculpture, so it's sort of the colors are relating to each other and they're bouncing off of each other.
Absolutely. And I think like thinking about the photographs in this room, we were talking about these turtles looking at us. And then we were looking at the sculptures and kind of this hood that emerges here in this interlocutor behind us. That's something that I love about the show is all of it. It incites you to look closer, to find these details that link the practice.
Basically, I look at a lot of artwork, whether it be ancient sculpture or, contemporary work. Most of my inspiration comes from looking at other works.
But in a way, like I love, we were talking about appropriation earlier. You used a word that I love, absorbed in my practice. I love that idea of like absorption and these.
Yes, because I think that is how it works, because it's not, it's almost unconscious. Mm-hmm. Because if you are on all the time, so then you're absorbing all the time.
Totally.
It could be votive gestures or how something is totemic. And these are ancient forms that have been tried and they have worked out. And that's what I mean by absorption.
And that meets video games.
I had been exposed to shows like Star Trek and movies like Terminator and Alien. So even though I was interested in figurative sculpture, but there was always a twist, which is to think about the grotesque and to think about the monsters that can be benign. But then you're also looking at work of like Daumier, where the caricature and the grotesque comes into it. And I was also been interested in like James Ensor, the imagery of like clowns or the circus, or where there's a way of describing in a much more imaginative way the hidden realities,
Yeah. And something else I really loved, it was I think an interview with you, and it was talking about, because humans, like, we can be monsters too, right? But
we are,
yes. Right? Like, and I guess when you talk about climate, right, like, and setup, like, we're setting up a monster, we're monsters in a horror film in a way.
Well, you feel like you're in a setup because there is no way out.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, but also this idea that maybe these creatures from another world would have sorted out all the problems that we couldn't do.
Or they're just waiting for us to disappear.
Good thing.